Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you today for our weekly family support Q&A. We've got a couple of guests from our own team today to talk about the ARC's initiatives around diversity and equity.
Yeah, my name is Georgia Cuss. I have worked at the St. Louis ARC since 2015. I started in our residential services department, worked in one of our homes for about 2 years, and then worked in day services up until 2022 in a variety of roles with quality and managing a couple of our sites that work with older adults, our Aging with Empowerment sites. And now I work in our quality and training department as the director, and have done that for about a year and 5 days. So it's very exciting to be here. I've been with the Ready Committee since its revamp in, Stephanie's going to talk about our history in just a moment, but for the last 3 to 4 years. And it's a delight to be there.
I'm Stephanie Scott. I have been at the ARC for 13 years. I got my start as a practicum student when I was getting my master's in social work over at UMSL. I reported to Sharon. I got to do a lot of things with our family support department. I left, finished school, really thought I was going to go down a clinical path, and ended up really just loving the ARC's philosophy and how we did our work and begging for a job here. So since then, I have spent a lot of time in the quality department as a coordinator and then a director. Have had several other services over time that I worked with, including our behavior department, employment, nutrition, and most recently as vice president of support services and strategy. I get to hang out with Georgia in the quality and training team, our leisure department, our ISLA Connect program, our leisure department, transition services, and I oversee strategic planning. And I have been, I'll talk about the history of Ready, but I've been involved since it's been like 10 years. So.
And I don't know if you said this, but Stephanie is the new vice president over family supports and children's services.
Yes.
So we're super happy to have her providing us with some additional support and leadership. So you are welcome on our team, Steph. So I do want to go back. I looked, and then we interviewed you all the last time in 2020 before we had all fancy Zoom stuff and recordings going on. So tell everybody a little bit about kind of our journey to create a space for diversity and equity. And I know, Stephanie, that started really with some training that you got at the United Way.
This has been a topic of conversation for a long time. I think as a disability-focused organization where we are working towards our vision of full inclusion, that this has been a part of our work, and not just looking at part of a person related to the disability, but the whole person and all the different elements that make them who they are. And we had some goals around DEI for a while in some of our quality plans, accreditation, but what really started kicking us off to taking action was a training series with United Way, which Sharon mentioned. And at this point, that was about 5 or 6 years ago, where there was a group of nonprofits who applied to be a part of this training series with United Way, where they brought in a facilitator. It was Natalie Self, who's currently over at Cortex, I believe. And she led us through, I mean, this was like 5 different sessions over like a 6 to 8 month period, where we would come together and really work through the whys, the hows, and establish some goals of how to move forward. So we had some action plans that came out of that. It led to us starting to get our Ready committee together. We ended up going through a second round of training with United Way, which Mark Healy, our president CEO, and at the time, Nikki Paris, who was our director of marketing, and a part of our Ready committee, took part in that. And that led to action on specific items that were in our plan that really took us to the next level. And so the Ready Committee has been in full force since 2019. And we meet monthly and have been continuing to work on action plans that we set based on feedback we get from surveys with staff, on goals we have as an organization related to our strategy, and just really trying to keep things moving, because there's no one person at the ARC where this is their position, where they're in charge of DEI work. We're all owning this, and so we're keeping it moving the best we can.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's such a journey, and I think we learn new things every day. So it's really exciting for me to see us kind of put some structure in place around a topic that we've looked at forever and ever. So Georgia, organizing a committee for something like this is a little bit different than a safety committee or even our self-advocate committee. You probably had to do a lot of thought as to how to bring in the right people to make it the right space for that conversation. Who's in the membership of Ready? How did you get that done?
That has been a pretty thoughtful process over the years. For our initial recruiting of the current group, we did sort of an all call for anyone who might be interested, and people submitted answers to just a few questions about why they were interested in the group, if they have any background in social justice work or DEI initiatives specifically, if they have any identity characteristics that they wanted to share about themselves that might lend a helpful perspective or a more diverse perspective to this group. And then certainly information about where they work at the agency, because we wanted to get a diverse representation in that way as well. And that mirrors our process today. Anytime we catch wind that someone might be interested, which we try to make known, that we have a rolling admissions process, people will reach out to us and say why they're interested, where they work, and anything that they'd like to share. And then at this point, the current committee will listen to a de-identified blurb about potential members and vote on if that person might be a good fit. And I'll say in a very nice way, we tend to have really great people apply for membership, and so we are usually quite open to anyone who has passion and time and interest. And so we currently have 15 or 16 folks from around the agency. Stephanie and I are two of the leadership team. Over the years, the leadership team has not just been cisgender white women. At the moment it is, and we try really hard to make sure that we are aware of that in the way that we approach the work. But we have folks ranging from a DSP level through the VP level, which Steph is our VP representative. We have folks in day services and employment, leisure, connect, family supports, a couple folks, HR, quality and training, as well as some individuals who do receive services from the ARC. So that has been incredibly valuable, that blend of people and those perspectives. It's a pretty wide age range, racial representation, gender identity, LGBTQ plus identity. All of that has been incredibly valuable to the work that we do, I'll say.
So this question is really going to be for both of you guys. You can volley it back and forth, but I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I'm thinking about 2020, and it was a kind of a crazy year to implement something like this. There was a lot of turmoil with George Floyd. There was issues with pandemics and all kinds of things that came up from that reflected maybe some prejudice people had. And I'm curious, over the last 3+ years, where do you feel like you had some successes that you want to brag about and share with everybody?
I do think, just like at a base level, bringing these topics to the forefront was a success. The fact that it is a part of everyday decision making and conversations and budgeting and planning, that to me, that it has become not just like the separate thing that this committee over here does, but more of the fabric of how we are operating, is a huge win. Does not mean that we like rest on that and don't continue to push those conversations, but I think that's a shift I've seen in my time here that is really, really positive. And that has led to us being able to have forums where people can come together around a specific topic, whether it was George Floyd or a different topic within the realm of diversity, where we listen to people share their experiences and we're able to ask questions and have a back and forth dialogue. I think that made a huge difference in the level of understanding across our leadership team, across departments. So in my mind, that's been a huge win. And I think, COVID brought a lot of challenges, but one thing that it did bring is our ability to do things virtually. And I think that has resulted in a more robust participation in not just the committee, but the different activities and efforts we have. That, someone might be working in a house and they're popping on a meeting or popping into a listening session. And it's just made it way more accessible, which has been great. Georgia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think an extension of all of that is that we have seen at the start of an integration of conversations like this into the culture of the agency overall, not just from management. And that's been pretty neat. We tried hard this year in particular to sort of kickstart some bigger more agency-wide or slightly broader celebrations of cultural groups or identities. We did stuff for Pride, we did stuff for Juneteenth, and those we supported, but we didn't have to facilitate fully because they were really program driven. Residential services and day services helped push those in particular into really cool directions. So that I think is an indicator that what we're doing is having an impact. And I think other things that we've been able to do that help with that to maintain the conversation are things like developing frameworks for training for management and for staff overall that we have kicked off with management, and we're going to keep it going with staff on a more ongoing basis. We've identified a platform for staff members to report discrimination or microaggressions that they experience in the workplace, and it's an anonymous third party so that staff can remove any fear of further discrimination in their supervisory line or whatever it might be. We have attended some staff meetings to help get the word out about who we are, but also provide some guidance on specific topics that have come up. We just today had someone come to us with a really helpful thought about the way that racial and ethnic culture in their department might influence a leadership decision that they were making, and they wanted to consult with us on that. So being available just for one-on-one consultation, I think is a pretty big win that we're seeing. And then lots of stuff ongoing. We have a pretty long list of goals for 2022, 2023, now heading into fiscal 2024, that are things that are in the works toward ongoing engagement and transparency and cool things like that, which we can talk more about, but it's
yes,
good.
I'm going to ask you about your goals, but I want to stay with this topic for a minute, because one of the things that I think DEI has taken a pretty hard hit this year. There's a lot of conversations about why we even need to have it and what the purpose of it is. And I want to know your perspectives about how this impacts the quality of our services. Typically, this is a Q&A that's for our family members and for the people who get our services. Why should they care about this?
Our approach as an organization has always been to be person-centered, that we are not just looking at, oh, you're wanting to play in this sports league or you're looking for a job and we're just going to focus on those pieces. We look at the whole person, what's going on across their life, across their relationships, knowing that all those pieces play off of each other and impact life as a whole. and diversity is a part of that. And all those different elements of who makes someone tick and what they are passionate about, and who they want to be in relationship with, and their cultural celebrations. And we are not able to support people to have a high quality of life that is driven by them and their wishes without understanding those things, and without having conversation around those things, not shying away from that. And so for me, it all comes back to quality of life. And no one wants to have part of their life in the shadows and to not be acknowledged. And we want to make sure that people can come as they are, be who they are, and we are going to support them.
Anything you want to add to that, Georgia?
No, I really agree. And I think that extends to, both staff as well as people we support, that attitude. And so increased awareness, and then enhanced accessibility of all these things, and intersection of disability identity with all the other identity groups that go into this work, I think is really important, and has been a good direction to take it.
I think it's so integral for us to have visibility and open conversations about this, because it does demonstrate to people that are coming in for services that they can have those conversations and bring those things to us. And certainly the quality of their staff's working life is going to impact the quality of their services as well. So we do have a question from the audience about whether we've addressed any internal policies and either added new policies or rewritten them as a result of this committee.
I think what Georgia alluded to earlier, the reporting policy around stuff that's going on in the workplace, and that's been some new things that have come to light that we have worked on. And there will, just a little teaser for a future Q&A, we will be rolling out something similar for families and people who receive services that we will debut this fall. So stay tuned for that. I think we have always had in our policy statements around anti-discrimination, and I don't know that people were fully aware of all the things that encompassed. And I think certain groups were feeling like maybe they were not acknowledged in our policies. So we did some work around making sure people knew that here are all the identities that are protected, and that whether you're a staff person, whether you're a person getting services. So that was something that we had pushed out. Georgia, are other things coming to mind for you?
Yeah, I think the discrimination policy is one that we made sure to look at and revamp as part of the efforts to educate around it. We also have historically had, we have subcommittees that do more focused work within our group ongoing. In 2022, one of our subcommittees was tasked with reviewing agency policies and looking for language through a DEI lens, and just sort of across the boards looking. And they made progress for making our language more inclusive, and for thinking about ways, for instance, gendered language that didn't need to be there, or whatever it was. And that, I think, has been helpful. And that being said, there's always more work to be done on that. It's something that will come as no surprise to anyone who does committee work or just works on stuff like this in general, is that there are always more projects than there is time and capacity to complete them. So I love that question, and it's always on our list, because that subcommittee did fall off in 2022 because they made good progress, but I think that will be one that we do keep coming back to every couple of years as time keeps moving and language evolves and all good things.
Yeah. Yeah, and even all our application forms, we changed a lot of that language so that we would really let people know they had a place to express their identity. And I think people don't realize that can have a huge impact just by showing that that's an option. When we first were encouraged to put our pronouns on our signatures, which I noticed mine didn't pop up on Zoom today for some reason, I had to change it. The same day, someone we support came to me and said that they identified as gender fluid. And I don't think they would have come to me if they wouldn't have looked at my signature and said, oh, this is something she acknowledges and has some awareness of. So I think there's very small things that we can do to open doors for people that are really important. Well, I don't want to leave without too much time left to talk about what your goals are for the future, because I love a scoop. So give me a scoop, y'all. What's in the works for the coming year? What are you excited about?
So there's been a ton of work done over the last 2 years to create and package training materials that, as Georgia said, we've used some components, but we have not fully rolled that out. So I'm excited to dig back into that and figure out how do we utilize that across the agency, across teams. So that's very exciting to me. I hope I can share it. We are going to have a table at Tower Grove Pride. I'm super stoked about that. Please come see us if you're going to be there. There's a lot of this like celebratory and like, you know, the different months that occur. We're doing a lot of really deep work around what's important there and where do we need to be represented as an organization. So those are the things that I think are top of my list. Georgia, what about
Yeah.
yours?
I think some pieces that I'm excited about are that we are at a point where we're really ready for someone external to come help us review our processes. We've done a lot of good work. We're hitting a point where, of course, there's always work to do and we're never done, but we could use some outside perspective on how to make it better, certainly from experts, because as Stephanie said, none of us is designated to do this full time. It's not, and yeah, none of us have exclusively expertise in this, nor is our time fully dedicated to it. And so having someone else help with that would be good. And we have narrowed down a couple of options for consultants to come help us with that. And so sometime in the next, I'm going to say 6 months to a year, that will be coming in and be really a helpful next step for us. We have a internal data dashboard that's ready to go once we have a couple other pieces plugged in, but the template for it is ready and a lot of the content is ready so that we can continue engaging with our agency and certainly staff members, but also beyond in a more meaningful way and keep the communication and transparency flowing. So I'm excited about those pieces. And then there are some fun other projects that hopefully will be more at the forefront that also increase accessibility within our own agency to make the ARC itself a more disability friendly place, because as much as we really try to be, there are ways in which we are not. We all have bias that we don't realize we have toward things like that. So I think the conversation has been going on that for a while and kicked off a little bit more recently with certainly some staff hires, but also plans that Ready committee members have been excited about, like ASL classes agency-wide, or finding ways to make our training platform more accessible to folks who have a variety of approaches or things like that I'm really hoping we'll get to keep focusing on in the next year, because that would be really good.
I'm really glad you brought up disability as part of the DEI process, because I think that's another way in which this is clearly tied to our mission and supporting people and families. Disability is a big part of our approach to DEI. I love hearing that we're looking at our own accessibility through a really close lens, and I do think it's important to have some outside voices come in. I want to just say, before we have a chance for kind of final closing statements, Georgia, I want to just talk a little bit about the Ready newsletter, because I think that's been such a nice opportunity for you all to share information with us. Can you talk about kind of how we get that information out to employees so that they're aware of potential resources and ideas?
We have a few different platforms for trying to disseminate information. We have historically had a newsletter, which I'm going to say in 2020, which we've talked about was a big year, was a monthly newsletter. And that went to all staff who were interested, and then would be shared across programs and things. And then we brought it down to quarterly, because that was about the flow that it started to make sense. And now we're at a place where it makes sense to integrate with our larger monthly newsletter. So we're doing all of that, but we also have our integrated televisions that are at every single work site around the agency where we can promote events or initiatives. People can use a link to open up more info on their phones via that TV screen, things like that. And then word of mouth ends up being incredibly helpful because we have such a wide range of people who are on the committee. They, we centralize the information and then go forth. And so that's a good old fashioned way to do it.
I want to make sure that we have a chance to have any kind of final thing that you want our audience to know about the ARC's commitment to diversity, what's happening within the committee, and maybe your dreams for the future. So, Georgia, you want to go first, and then we'll wrap up with Steph?
Sure. I'd say, well, I'm going to think about the dreams for the future piece, I guess. Really, just that because agency commitment is really strong, my dream is that only continues, and that conversations like the ones that I referenced that popped up today are just more and more natural. That people just think of us pretty readily, as it were. And so that to me feels the most exciting, because we know the work is never done, but we really are passionate about it. And I'll say that my other dream is that it really is always an all call. So if people who are on here know that you have someone in your life that is connected to the ARC and passionate about this work, please reach out anytime. We love full membership options, but also options for just tagging in and having conversations if folks have passion and perspective they want to share. We love that. And yeah, I'm grateful for it always.
Cool. Thank you, Georgia. Stephanie.
I think in terms of dreams for the future, we've been pretty internally focused and looking at staff experience and service experience. I would love to see us one day have strong partnerships with community groups that are doing similar work. I think one, so that we can have a representation from that intersectional viewpoint with disability at the center. But also, like, St. Louis has done some really deep work around diversity, particularly from a racial lens, and we continue to have work to do related to that. And I just think there's a lot of expertise in St. Louis that we can benefit from, and maybe we could also provide some benefit back. And I just think we will continue to move towards working on our vision of full inclusion and continually unpacking what that means and including that DEI piece in that. So staying on the path.
Respect, collaboration, and empowerment. You guys are really living out those values, and I'm excited to see the work you've done and very thrilled for the future. So thank you all for coming today and listening to us. I hope you'll share this with friends and family, and have a great week. Bye, y'all.